Officer Jace Caldwell thought he ran the streets of Brookford with iron authority. A glance, a threat, and people backed down. It was a routine he perfected over years of unchecked power, intimidation, and under-the-table deals. Then he stopped the wrong person. Ramona Brooks, a soft-spoken black teacher fresh off a night shift of tutoring at risk teens. In one brutal moment, everything she believed about justice crumbled. But what Caldwell never saw coming was the single phone call Ramona made that would ignite an unstoppable chain reaction, unmasking a corrupt network and drawing the attention of federal agents. If you think you know how this ends, brace yourself, because when a quiet woman fights back and the FBI takes notice, even the oldest strongholds of corruption tremble. Ramona Brooks' story isn't just about one woman against a bent cop. It's about a community long oppressed, a system stretched to its breaking point, and the fury of truth when a timid voice decides to roar. Just before we get back into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Ramona Brooks had always believed in diligence and decency, even when life didn't reward her for it. At 32, she had spent the last decade teaching middle school math in a district where resources were minimal, and the heartbreak was daily. Yet she carried on, determined to make the lives of her students a little better. They needed someone to believe in them. On a blistering July afternoon in Brookford, a small city in the American Midwest, she was finally heading home after volunteering at a local outreach program for at-risk teens. Her arms were loaded with leftover worksheets and a half-eaten sandwich she'd never had time to finish. The minute she stepped from the center's main door, the smothering heat seized her breath. It was typical for midsummer, the air thick enough to cling to the skin. She checked her phone. 2 missed calls from her father, a retired auto mechanic, who worried constantly about her driving home late. Ramona reached her beat-up Honda Civic, relieved that no one lingered in the dark side street. Brookford wasn't exactly a war zone, but certain blocks had reputations for petty crime. She slid into the driver's seat and felt a wave of exhaustion. The sun, sinking beyond the row of brick buildings, cast a purple hue across the narrow street. She had 2 miles to go before she could sink into bed. But first, she needed gas. The gauge wavered dangerously close to empty, and the only station still open was a few blocks away. She started the engine, letting it sputter for a moment, then pulled onto the street. Despite her weariness, she reminded herself to stay alert. Her father's voice echoed in her head, telling her to keep her eyes on every side mirror, to never assume safety in a quiet neighborhood after dark. She was halfway to the station when she noticed flashing red and blue lights in the rearview mirror. Her heart skipped, an immediate, visceral alarm. Had she overlooked a stop sign? Was her taillight out? She signaled and eased to the curb. The cruiser behind her had tinted windows, but once the door opened, she recognized him by the silhouette. Officer Jace Caldwell. He was something of a local legend among residents for all the wrong reasons. She had seen him once at a school function, towering over faculty, a permanent scowl carving lines into his forehead. Rumor said he'd been doing favors for certain business owners in exchange for quiet envelopes slipped under the table. No one had ever proven it, though. Her pulse pounded. She inhaled, doing her best to appear calm. Caldwell strode up to her window, leaning down with an air of superiority. "License and registration?" he demanded curtly. She passed him both documents, noticing the faint sneer curling his lip. "Could I ask why you pulled me over, officer?" He gave her a once-over. "Broken taillight," he said, "and you were driving suspiciously." Ramona's gut twisted. She knew for a fact her taillights worked. Her father had just replaced them last month, right before the annual inspection. But she also knew better than to argue. "Yes, officer," she murmured, forcing politeness. He studied her license with excruciating slowness, letting the silence build. "You live on the south side," he commented. "What are you doing in this part of town?" She tried to keep her voice steady. "I volunteer at the youth center, helping kids with math." Caldwell's face remained impassive. He grunted and shone a flashlight into the back seat, illuminating a stack of folders. Step out of the car, he ordered. Her heart rate spiked. What? He pointed the beam at her chest, annoyance flaring in his eyes. Am I hearing back talk? Step out of the car, now. Fear coursed through her, but she nodded and obeyed, unfastening her seatbelt and exiting into the warm night air. She had never been in trouble with the law, never had so much as a parking ticket, yet the way Caldwell looked at her made her feel instantly guilty. Of what? She wasn't sure. He motioned for her to stand at the front of her car. The headlights cast their glow across the empty street. No other cars passed by at this hour. It was just her, Caldwell, and the oppressive darkness. Hands on the hood, he commanded. She hesitated but complied. The metal was hot beneath her palms, and she could feel her pulse in her fingertips. That's better, he said. His tone was too casual, too smug. She stayed silent. She'd heard horror stories. How quickly a simple traffic stop could escalate, especially for a black individual. At the same time, she was outraged. She'd done nothing wrong. He patted her down in a brusque manner that felt invasive. When he finished, he leaned close enough for her to catch a whiff of stale coffee and sweat. I'm going to search your vehicle. She turned her head sharply. Search? On what grounds? He shrugged. Suspicious behavior. If you got nothing to hide, you should cooperate, right? His words dripped with challenge. Anger flared in her chest. This was harassment, plain and simple. She'd taught her students about their rights, about the Fourth Amendment, but here in the real world, confronting a cop alone at night, those ideals felt fragile. She swallowed hard. I don't consent to a search. Caldwell smirked. Interesting, he said softly. Real interesting. He stepped away, raising his radio to request backup. She stood there, mind racing. She could try to film, but Caldwell's stance suggested that pulling out her phone might provoke him further. Her best hope was to remain calm, to pray there were body cams or dash cams capturing all this. Minutes later, another squad car pulled up with 2 more officers she didn't recognize. They looked at Caldwell, then at her, a flicker of uneasy curiosity in their eyes. We got a problem, Jace? One of them asked. Caldwell folded his arms. Lady here refused a search. Claims to be some volunteer teacher. Could be carrying. The insinuation was clear. She felt heat color her cheeks. Look, can you just give me a ticket if my light's out and let me go? She ventured, voice trembling despite her best effort. Caldwell ignored her plea. With backup now present, he popped her trunk and rummaged through her car, tossing papers and notebooks onto the pavement. Ramona's eyes stung with tears of anger and humiliation. It felt like an eternity, but in reality, the search lasted only a few minutes. When he finally stepped back, hands on his hips, there was nothing to find. No drugs, no weapons, just the usual teacher paraphernalia. And yet, Caldwell glared at her as if she'd done something unspeakable. Looks like you're clean, he said, like it was the worst news he'd had all day. She tried to remain dignified, tears now hot behind her eyes. May I go? He handed back her papers with obvious reluctance. Then, in a low tone only she could hear, he muttered, Watch yourself, Miss Brooks. I'll be around. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She could only imagine how many people had heard those words before. By the time Ramona made it to the gas station, she was running on fumes. She filled the tank in numb silence, the encounter replaying in her head. Should she report this? Would that even make a difference? Brookford's police department didn't exactly have a shining record for punishing its own. She arrived home to her modest one-bedroom apartment. Old textbooks lined every shelf, visual proof of how she'd clawed her way through a teaching credential program on scholarships and part-time jobs. She set her purse down with a trembling hand and gazed at her reflection in the mirror by the door. Her brown skin glistened with sweat, her eyes raw with frustration. Dad always told me to be careful, she whispered. She sank onto the couch, phone in hand. Every fiber of her being screamed for justice. But she knew going to the station in the morning to file a complaint might just paint a target on her back. Caldwell's "watch yourself" echoed in her mind. Instead, she did the only thing she could think of. She called her father, Don Brooks. He answered on the second ring, voice heavy with concern. "Mona, you all right?" "It's late." She told him everything. Silence hung at the other end for a moment as he absorbed the story. Finally, he sighed, a sound laced with pain. "Same old Brookford PD. You remember how your uncle got stopped 5 times in 1 month for fitting a description?" She nodded, though he couldn't see it. "I remember." "What do you plan to do?" Don asked carefully. She struggled to find the words. "I don't know yet. Maybe let it go. But Dad, it felt so wrong." "I hear you, baby." Don paused. "But if you want to do something, I got a friend, a lawyer friend, who might at least give advice. I don't want you going in there alone." A spark of hope flickered. "Really? You have a lawyer friend?" Don let out a short laugh. "I used to fix his old Chevy. Name's Victor Caldwell." Her stomach knotted. "Caldwell? Like Jace Caldwell?" "No relation. Just a coincidence. Victor Caldwell's a decent man, has an office downtown. Let me give him a call first thing in the morning." She thanked him, and after a brief good night, she ended the call. A swirling mixture of fear and relief coursed through her. She was petrified about stirring the hornet's nest, yet a part of her refused to let Caldwell's bullying slide. Morning light filtered through the faded curtains of her apartment, illuminating piles of educational pamphlets and half-corrected homework assignments. Ramona had barely slept. The memory of Caldwell's sneer loomed in her dreams, a reminder of how powerless she'd felt. Nevertheless, she forced herself up, brewed coffee, and ate a slice of toast she could hardly taste. She had lesson plans to finalize before Monday, but focusing was impossible. Around 9, her phone buzzed. Her father texted, "Victor Caldwell's expecting your call. Here's his number." She held the phone, heart pounding. Was this a step she was ready to take? Another wave of doubt hit her. She'd heard stories of people lodging complaints only to face reprisals, from heavier scrutiny to outright harassment. Still, she dialed. The office receptionist put her through to Victor Caldwell in less than a minute. "Ramona Brooks, yes. Don told me you'd be calling." A warm baritone greeted her. "You sound upset. Tell me what happened." She found herself pouring out the entire story. The baseless stop, the humiliating search, the unspoken threat. Victor listened with remarkable patience, occasionally interjecting small affirmations that let her know he was still there. When she finished, he sighed. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Officer Caldwell's name has popped up in more than one conversation about misconduct, but the department's not exactly known for cleaning house." Her shoulders tensed. "So? There's nothing I can do?" "I didn't say that. You can file a formal complaint, but you need to do it carefully. Going up against the department is risky, especially if certain superiors are looking the other way." She swallowed. "What about cameras? Dash cam, body cam?" Victor paused. "Brookford's PD budget is patchy. Some have working cams, some conveniently lose footage. But we can't let that dissuade us. At the very least, let me speak to a contact in the city council. They're more invested in not letting a scandal break. If I can gather evidence, other complaints, maybe statements from prior victims, I might push for an internal affairs investigation." Ramona felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you. That means a lot. I'm tired of feeling powerless." He lowered his voice. "I'll be honest, it won't be easy. But if we don't stand up to them, they keep doing it. Right?" She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "Right." He promised to keep her updated. After they hung up, Ramona sank onto a stool by the kitchen counter, half nauseous, half determined. She always told her students to use your voice, and now she had to heed her own advice. The next few days crawled by. She taught her summer math sessions, her face buried in lesson plans, when she wasn't scanning the classroom windows for squad cars. She knew that was irrational. Caldwell had bigger fish to fry than lurking outside her workplace. but fear was rarely logical. On Thursday afternoon, as she was grading papers in the teacher's lounge, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail but decided to answer. "Hello?" A raspy male voice responded. "Ms. Brooks, correct?" "Yes. This is Sergeant Kyle Forrester, Brookford PD's Internal Affairs. I got word you might have concerns about an officer." Her stomach dropped. That was fast. Had Victor already started pulling strings? Yes, I do. But I was hoping to speak with my lawyer before I won't take much of your time. We're just trying to ascertain the facts. His voice was polite enough, but there was an edge to it. "I understand you had an encounter with Officer Caldwell. Would you be available to come by the precinct and make a statement tomorrow?" Ramona's throat went dry. "I'd feel more comfortable if my lawyer was with me." A slight pause. "That's your right, Ms. Brooks. Let me know a convenient time." She gave a non-committal answer, then hung up. Her heart hammered. She immediately called Victor's office to see if he could accompany her. He agreed to meet her at the station. After she disconnected, she stared at the phone for a long moment. Something about the invitation to come by the precinct unsettled her. Perhaps it was normal procedure, but every instinct told her to tread lightly. On Friday morning, she pulled her car into the police station parking lot, feeling as though she were stepping into enemy territory. The building was a squat beige structure that looked more like a 1970s office complex than a center for law enforcement. A tattered American flag flapped overhead. Victor stood by the entrance in a crisp charcoal suit, his expression calm. He was a middle-aged black man with kind eyes that belied an underlying steeliness. "Glad you called me," he greeted her quietly. "I did some checking around. This could be standard procedure, or it could be a show of intimidation. Let's find out." Inside, the station smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. Forrester, a gray-haired officer with a vaguely stern face, came out to greet them. "Brooks, Mr. Caldwell," he said. "Let's go to a private room." They ended up in a cramped office with a single metal desk. Forrester closed the door and gestured for them to sit. "First, I want to reassure you that we take any allegations of misconduct seriously," he began. Victor nodded. "That's good to hear, Sergeant. My client has some concerns about the traffic stop and search." Forrester opened a file. "Officer Caldwell's version of events indicates Miss Brooks was weaving, possibly under the influence, and that's why he pulled her over. He also says she became aggressive." Ramona felt heat crawl up her neck. "That's not true. He said my taillight was out." Forrester looked at her carefully. "And was it?" "No, it was fine. Also, he searched my car without my consent." Forrester scribbled something in his notes. "He claims you gave verbal consent when you stepped out of the vehicle." She fought back a surge of anger. "That's a lot," Victor interjected, voice cool. "Sergeant, is there dashcam footage?" A flicker in Forrester's eyes. "That's what we're trying to determine. The dashcam in Caldwell's cruiser was undergoing repairs, apparently." Ramona's fingers dug into her knees. "How convenient." Forrester spread his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm just gathering statements. I can't conclude anything yet. Are you aware of any witnesses?" She shook her head, miserable. "It was late. I didn't see anyone." "Understood. Thank you for coming in." Forrester closed the file. "I'll be in touch." As they stepped out of the precinct, Ramona felt a heavy weight settle on her chest. That felt pointless. Victor gave a wry nod. Internal affairs rarely moves quickly unless there's overwhelming evidence, but we had to show good faith by cooperating. They walked into the parking lot, sunlight glaring. Victor cleared his throat. "In the meantime, I'll keep digging. We might need to find other people who've had run-ins with Caldwell. Build a pattern." She offered a faint, hopeful smile. "Thank you." 2 days later, on a muggy Sunday evening, Ramona was unlocking her apartment door when she noticed a slip of paper wedged in the frame. It looked like a business card with a handwritten note. "Ms. Brooks, my name is Gwen Hunt. Please call me..." I think we might have something in common. 5550134. Intrigued and slightly nervous, Ramona stepped inside, locked the door, and dialed the number. A woman with a calm, deliberate tone answered. Mrs. Brooks? Yes, this is Ramona. Gwen introduced herself as a single mother living in Brookford. I got your name from a friend who works at the youth center. I heard about your run-in with Caldwell. Ramona's heart pounded. Yes. He's had it out for me for years, Gwen said, her voice tight with emotion. I'm calling because maybe if we compare notes, we can help each other. I've filed 2 complaints against him that went nowhere. Ramona sank onto her couch, a ripple of both relief and outrage passing through her. 2 complaints? That's right. The first was when he pulled my teenage son over. He used a bogus tailgating charge to rummage through the car. Found nothing. The second time was even worse. Claimed my boy matched a suspect's description. They slammed him against a wall. A hot flush of anger crept up Ramona's neck. I'm so sorry. No apology needed. I just want to stop him from doing this to anyone else. Internal affairs never followed through. I suspect they bury these things. Ramona glanced at the business card. Have you talked to a lawyer? Once or twice, but I don't have the money to push a lawsuit. Gwen hesitated. But if there's enough of us complaining, maybe we can finally get traction. Maybe even the feds would look into it. That's what happened in another city near here, federal oversight, after repeated harassment complaints. Ramona was silent for a moment, the magnitude of it sinking in. I'm working with a lawyer, Victor Caldwell. He's trying to piece together evidence of a pattern. That's good, Gwen said. Maybe I can give him my statements, and I know 2 others who might join in. A flicker of hope. Yes, thank you. This could be really important. They traded contact information, promising to stay in touch. By the time Ramona hung up, her hands trembled with adrenaline. She had never intended to become a crusader, but something inside her felt called to a greater purpose. Maybe this was bigger than just her or Gwen or the teenage son. How many others had been quietly terrorized by Caldwell's tactics? The next week, Ramona invited Gwen and 2 other local women, Tasha and Dolores, to a small meeting at her apartment. Victor Caldwell joined them to listen. Tasha's voice shook as she recounted how Caldwell had demanded personal favors in exchange for not ticketing her broken-down car. Dolores wiped tears while describing how her young nephew had been hauled into juvenile detention on trumped-up resisting charges. Victor took careful notes, occasionally pausing to ask clarifying questions. We need any official paperwork? Citations, times, dates, officer names, he said. The more details, the stronger the case. Are we safe? Gwen asked bluntly. He's not going to come after us, is he? Victor's gaze flickered. I can't guarantee safety, but if we keep everything documented and possibly engage the media, it might be riskier for him to retaliate. Ramona's gut churned at the thought of exposing herself publicly. But seeing how these women had suffered made her realize they couldn't hide in the shadows forever. They spent the rest of the evening compiling as many specifics as possible. Just as things started to feel like they were moving forward, Ramona got a phone call late at night that chilled her to the core. She was drifting off to sleep when her cell buzzed. She answered groggily. Hello? Silence for a heartbeat, then a slow exhale. Think you're real clever? She bolted upright in bed, heart hammering. Who is this? A low chuckle. You better watch your back. People who cause trouble around here learn real fast. We see you, Miss Brooks. The line went dead. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the phone onto the bedsheet. Could it be Caldwell? Someone connected to him? Fear bled into anger. She refused to let them scare her into silence. She texted Victor immediately. Just got a threatening call from an unknown number. He replied almost instantly. Save the number if you can. Record the time. We need to show it to the authorities. Authorities, she thought bitterly. The same authorities who might be behind the call. But she followed his advice, documenting every detail. That weekend, she decided to visit her father's home, seeking comfort in a place that felt safe. Don Brooks lived in a small, cozy bungalow on the south side of Brookford. The living room was decorated with framed pictures of Ramona's childhood achievements, and the air always smelled of her father's cooking. This time, fried catfish. Ramona told him about the threatening call as they sat at the kitchen table, plates of catfish and cornbread between them. Don's expression darkened with each sentence. "Cowards," he spat. "Trying to intimidate you." She nodded, tears burning behind her eyes. "It's working a little bit," she admitted. "I'm scared." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "It's natural, but I'm proud of you. I raised you to stand up for what's right." She squeezed his hand, the simple gesture fortifying her resolve. "Thank you, Dad." Outside, the summer sky rumbled with distant thunder. The weather forecast had promised heavy storms tonight, an apt reflection of how her life felt. "You can stay here if you want," Don offered. "Spare bedroom's always yours." She considered it. There was a certain appeal in not being alone at her apartment. "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that." That night, the rain hammered the roof, and flashes of lightning revealed tree branches swaying in fierce wind. Ramona curled up under an old blanket in her childhood room, staring at the shadows. Tomorrow, she'd keep pushing forward, because if she backed down now, Caldwell and men like him would keep crushing innocent people's lives. On Monday morning, Victor called with a surprising update. A potential whistleblower inside the department wanted to talk. "He reached out to me through a friend," Victor explained. "Said he's been documenting Caldwell's misdeeds, but can't come forward publicly yet. We're meeting him tonight at a discreet location." Ramona's pulse soared. "Is it safe?" Victor hesitated. He said so, but we'll be cautious. Despite the risk, the possibility of inside information was too big to ignore. If an officer had records, unofficial logs of Caldwell's false stops, intimidation tactics, or missing dashcam footage, it could turn the tide. That evening, they gathered at an abandoned strip mall on the edge of Brookford. Victor insisted on meeting inside an empty retail space that belonged to a friend of his, away from prying eyes. Ramona felt her nerves stretched taut. A tall man in plain clothes arrived, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. Victor introduced him only as Officer M. The man's face was etched with worry. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, glancing around. "I can't stay long." Ramona studied him, noticing how his right hand shook slightly. "We appreciate you risking this." He took a deep breath. "I've been on the force 10 years. I've seen Caldwell do things that made my skin crawl. Harassing people for no reason, rewriting reports to cover his tracks. When we got new dashcams installed, he found ways to disable them." Victor eyed him. "You have evidence of this?" M nodded, pulling out a small thumb drive. "Some backups from the old server. I hid them after I realized Caldwell was wiping footage, and it's not just him. He's got at least 2 other officers running the same racket." Ramona's heart pounded. This could blow everything wide open." Mash swallowed, his voice quivering. "Look, I have a family, my kid's in middle school. If Caldwell finds out I'm behind this..." Victor laid a hand on his shoulder. "We'll do everything we can to protect you. But you have to know, once we use this, there's no going back." The man gave a resigned nod. "I understand. Just please handle it carefully. If you go straight to the chief, I guarantee the files will vanish. You might want to get the feds involved." Ramona's ears perked at that. She'd heard about the possibility of a federal civil rights investigation. This evidence could be the key. Officer M checked his watch nervously. "I should go. Good luck." He slipped out into the dark parking lot, leaving Ramona and Victor alone with the thumb drive. They stared at it as if it were a live grenade. They hurried to Victor's office, hearts still racing. In a small back room that doubled as a file storage space, Victor booted up an older laptop. He inserted the thumb drive, and they waited. Several folders appeared, each labeled with dates spanning the last 2 years. Inside were video files, text documents, scanned police reports. Some videos refused to play, possibly corrupted, but others launched, showing grainy footage from dash cams. One clip depicted Caldwell approaching a parked car with tinted windows, shouting for the driver to step out. The audio crackled, but you could hear Caldwell insulting the driver, calling him boy and threatening to crack your skull if he didn't cooperate. Another clip captured Caldwell bragging to a colleague about confiscating cash from a suspect, but not reporting the full amount. Ramona felt sick. This was worse than she'd imagined. Victor's face was grim. We need to secure copies of this in multiple places, right away. She exhaled, her thoughts buzzing. Is this enough to involve the FBI? Victor gave a slow nod. I think so, and we should. The local internal affairs are compromised, or at least reluctant. A federal probe might be the only real chance. Ramona clutched the back of a chair for support. Then let's do it. The next morning, Victor made contact with a friend in the Justice Department. A single phone call set off a series of hush-hush emails, culminating in a planned meeting with FBI agents in a nearby city. They wanted to avoid the Brookford PD's knowledge until they had a solid hold on the evidence. Ramona was sitting in her classroom, finishing up the summer session, when Victor texted, "We have a meeting tomorrow at noon, secret location. Be ready." A thrill of anxiety shot through her. She tried to focus on her students for the remainder of the day, but all she could think about was the possibility that Caldwell might sense a storm coming. The more she imagined his reaction, the more nervous she became. The following day, she called in a sub for her class, citing a family emergency. Don insisted on driving her to the meeting. "I want to make sure you get there safe," he said. They arrived at a small federal building in the neighboring city of Aldersville, about an hour outside Brookford. Two FBI agents, Special Agent Harris and Special Agent Pierce, escorted Ramona and Victor to a secure conference room. Both agents were calm, professional, yet there was a keen intensity behind their eyes. Victor carefully laid out the thumb drive, the documentation from Gwen, Tasha, Dolores, and others, along with Ramona's personal account. The agents asked pointed questions, scribbled notes, and examined the evidence. Agent Harris looked up finally. "If this is authentic, we're looking at potential civil rights violations, corruption, even racketeering. Caldwell and any involved officers could be in serious trouble." Ramona almost couldn't believe what she was hearing. After weeks of feeling helpless, now the highest level of law enforcement was taking them seriously? "We'll run these files through our tech team," Agent Pierce said. "But based on what I see, there's enough to open an official investigation. We'll do a quiet inquiry first, gather additional intel, then proceed with caution. We don't want them destroying evidence once they catch wind." Her pulse hammered in her ears. "How soon?" Harris exchanged a glance with Pierce. "Immediately. We'll keep you updated, but it might be a few weeks before you see anything overt. We have to be strategic." Victor leaned back, relief evident in his eyes. "Thank you. Ms. Brooks, and these other complainants, are risking a lot by coming forward." Harris nodded. "We understand. We'll do our best to protect them. In fact, we might coordinate with the state attorney general as well, to ensure local complicit officials don't interfere." Ramona felt a sudden urge to cry. Finally, real hope. "Thank you." Over the subsequent weeks, Ramona noticed subtle shifts around Brookford. Certain officers she recognized grew stiffer in her presence, some refusing eye contact. Was it paranoia, or did they suspect something was happening behind the scenes? She kept a low profile, traveling in groups whenever possible. Meanwhile, Gwen informed her of curious phone calls to her home from unknown numbers. Tasha reported being followed home once. Dolores had a strange incident where someone knocked on her door at 3 a.m., but vanished before she answered. They all braced for a retaliatory strike. Victor told them to document every incident, no matter how minor. This might become evidence of harassment, he explained. "Harassment, or worse," Gwen murmured grimly. Almost a month later, Ramona was leaving the youth center after an evening tutoring session. It was nearly 10, and the shadows along the sidewalk felt menacing. Dawn had offered to come pick her up, but she decided to remain independent despite her nerves. She stepped onto the curb, scanning the street. Her car was parked under a flickering street lamp. Halfway to the vehicle, a figure stepped out from behind a dumpster. Her heart lurched. A tall man in plain clothes, baseball cap low. For a terrifying second, she thought it might be Caldwell. But as he stepped closer, she recognized Officer M, the whistleblower. "You scared me," she hissed. He looked around, anxious. "We need to talk. I've heard rumors at the station. People are whispering that something big is coming. Feds, maybe. Caldwell's on edge. He's pressing his buddies to find out who's ratting on him." Ramona's stomach twisted. "Have they figured you out?" He shook his head. "Not yet. But they suspect it's someone inside. The tension is high." She clutched her purse strap. "What about the FBI? Shouldn't they be moving in soon?" "They're building their case, but Caldwell's network might be bigger than they realized. He's even got a friend in the district attorney's office. They're going to try something to derail the investigation, maybe pin something on you or your lawyer." Her pulse thundered. "Me? What would they—" Officer M shrugged helplessly. "Plant evidence? Frame you for drug possession? Who knows? Watch your back. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it." The wind picked up, rustling trash along the curb. Ramona swallowed hard, a fresh wave of dread sweeping through her. "Thank you for warning me." He gave a terse nod. "Stay safe." She hurried to her car, heart pounding, feeling like she was in a spy novel. As she drove home, she couldn't shake the sense that danger pressed in on all sides. Her father insisted she relocate to his house for the time being. "That's not cowardice, it's smart," he said firmly. "We don't know what they'll try." She hated feeling like a fugitive in her own city, but she couldn't argue the logic. She packed a suitcase and moved into her old room. Despite the tension, there was something comforting about hearing her father's voice in the kitchen each morning, about having someone share coffee and reassure her it would be okay. Meanwhile, Victor pressed on, communicating regularly with the FBI. Agent Harris told him they were close to gathering enough to file for indictments. "We just need a little more time," Harris explained over the phone. "We're also coordinating with some higher-ups who want a major crackdown on police corruption across the state." But time, it seemed, was running out. It happened on a Tuesday. Ramona was in the middle of her third seried class when the school's assistant principal knocked on her classroom door, apologizing for the interruption. "Miss Brooks, there's a call for you in the office. It's urgent." She glanced at the perplexed faces of her students. "Quiet reading," she instructed, then stepped into the hallway. In the main office, she picked up the phone. "Ramona Brooks here." "Jens Brooks," came the nervous voice of a co-worker from the youth center. "We had a break-in. Someone trashed your desk, scattered your files, your personal items. I think they were looking for something." Ramona's pulse skyrocketed. "Are the police there?" "That's just it. Officer Caldwell was among the first on scene. He's waiting to speak with you." Her throat went dry. This was a blatant move. I'll be there as soon as I can." She replaced the receiver, fear clawing at her. She was sure Caldwell orchestrated this to intimidate her. Meeting him at the youth center alone was the last thing she wanted. She called Victor, explaining in a hushed, urgent tone. He exhaled sharply. "Do not go alone. I'll meet you there." She informed the assistant principal of a personal emergency, then rushed out to her car. Adrenaline thrummed in her veins. The youth center was only a 10-minute drive, but it felt like hours as every passing intersection seemed sinister. Upon arrival, she spotted 2 squad cars out front. To her relief, Victor's sedan was also parked near the entrance. She climbed out, bracing herself. Inside, the center's main hallway was a mess. Chairs overturned, papers strewn. A couple of other teachers and staff milled around, looking rattled. Victor waved her over. "You okay?" She took a shaky breath. "Yes. Where's Caldwell?" He nodded toward a side room. "He's in there, waiting. Just be calm. I'll be with you." They entered the side room, a small office used by staff to store supplies. Standing amidst the disarray was Officer Jace Caldwell himself, arms crossed over his chest, wearing that familiar sneer. Another officer lurked behind him, silent and watchful. Finally, Caldwell drawled, "Ms. Brooks, sorry about this mess." She glared at him, refusing to be cowed. "I'm sure you are." He raised an eyebrow, the very picture of feigned innocence. "Do you have any idea who might want to ransack your workspace?" Victor stepped in. "That's a question best answered by a thorough investigation, not a conversation with potential suspects." The second officer bristled. "You calling us suspects?" Victor smiled grimly. "Strange that Ms. Brooks, who is known to have filed complaints, is suddenly targeted. Anyone could be behind it, though. We'd like an official incident report." Caldwell shrugged, pulling out a notepad. "Let's do it." He gestured for Ramona to speak. She recounted her day, how she was at school, and got a call about the break-in. The officer scribbled notes, with maddening calm. When she finished, Caldwell flipped the notepad shut. "We'll see what we can do. Probably just some punks looking for quick valuables." She almost choked on her anger. "They didn't take any valuables. They destroyed my teaching materials, though." He gave a flippant shrug. Some people just like to vandalize. Before leaving, Caldwell leaned in slightly, his voice a near whisper meant only for her ears. "Told you once before, Miss Brooks. Watch yourself." Her whole body trembled, but she refused to look away. She let him see her fury, her defiance. He lingered a moment, then strode out with the other officer, the echo of their boots fading down the hall. That night, Ramona tried to sleep at Don's house, but found it impossible. She replayed the threat, Caldwell's sneer, the silent vow he seemed to make that he wouldn't rest until he broke her spirit. She rose from bed around midnight, tiptoeing into the living room. Her father was still awake, sitting in his old recliner with a worried expression. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" he asked softly. She sank onto the couch. "I'm so tired of this. The waiting, the fear." Don leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "This is how real change happens sometimes, through a long, hard fight. I'm proud of you for pushing back." She gave him a tremulous smile. "Thanks, Dad." Thunder rolled in the distance again, the second storm that summer. A fitting backdrop, she thought. Just when the tension felt unbearable, Victor called with news that the FBI was preparing to make a move. "They've got enough probable cause to arrest Caldwell and several others," he told Ramona excitedly. "It could happen any day, so stay alert. The last thing we need is you in harm's way when the hammer drops." Her stomach fluttered. At last. 2 days later, on a warm Saturday morning, Ramona got a text from Gwen. "Holy smokes, turn on the news." She rushed to the living room, flicked on the TV, and saw the local station running a breaking story. Footage showed FBI agents escorting uniformed officers out of the Brookford precinct in handcuffs. The screen headline read, "FBI raids Brookford PD. Multiple officers arrested on corruption and civil rights violations." Her breath caught. She scanned the footage until she caught sight of Caldwell, scowling fiercely, hands cuffed behind his back. Agents hustled him into a waiting black SUV. Ramona's hand flew to her mouth in shock and relief. It was real. It was happening. Don let out a triumphant whoop, clapping his hands. "They got him, baby! They got him!" Tears welled in Ramona's eyes. She had dreamt of this moment, but never truly believed it would come. They had done it. Through courage, alliances, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Over the following hours, more details emerged. The FBI's press release implicated Officer Caldwell and a small ring of cohorts in extortion, harassment, falsification of reports, and racial profiling. Evidence from the thumb drive played a key role. The feds also arrested a clerk in the DA's office who'd been feeding Caldwell confidential information. The arrests set off shockwaves across Brookford. Some residents rejoiced openly, exhaling years of pent-up frustration. Others expressed disbelief that it had finally happened. The mayor held an emergency press conference, promising a thorough overhaul of the police department. By evening, Ramona's phone was flooded with messages from friends, colleagues, even strangers who'd heard her story. Gwyn called, crying tears of relief, saying it was the first time in years she felt truly safe letting her son walk the streets. Tasha and Dolores texted joyous thanks, praising Ramona for spearheading the fight. Ramona insisted it wasn't just her, Officer M, Victor Caldwell, everyone's testimonies had made it possible, but deep down, she felt a pride and empowerment she'd never known. 3 months later, as the dust settled, Caldwell and his associates stood trial in federal court. Ramona was called to testify, she recounting that fateful night of the baseless stop, the humiliating search, and his chilling threats. The prosecution presented dashcam footage from the thumb drive, showing Caldwell's pattern of abuse. Caldwell's defense tried to paint Ramona as overly dramatic, questioning her memory and motives, but the onslaught of corroborating evidence drowned out those attempts. When the verdict came, guilty on multiple counts, the courtroom buzzed with satisfaction. Caldwell was sentenced to significant prison time, along with 2 of his closest cohorts. A few more officers took plea deals, confessing to lesser charges in exchange for testifying against him. The ripple effect led to a full-scale audit of Brookford PD. Citizens demanded a new chief, new policies, mandatory body cams. Brookford City Council, under federal oversight, began the long process of rebuilding community trust. On a crisp autumn evening, Ramona and her father strolled through a revitalized Brookford farmers market. The air felt clearer, lighter. Vendors sold apples, pumpkins, homemade jam. The city, though still grappling with old scars, seemed to pulse with renewed hope. "How does it feel?" Don asked, gesturing around at the throng of smiling families. Ramona smiled softly. "Different. Like I can breathe. Like maybe we all can." They headed to the newly inaugurated Community Relations booth, a space designed for transparent dialogue between residents and police. She found Gwen and Tasha already there, greeting visitors and explaining the program. Dolores was handing out flyers about citizens' rights. It felt surreal, stepping inside that booth. 6 months ago, she never would have imagined the city even hosting such a thing. Now, a uniformed officer, one of the new recruits, stood by, calmly answering questions. No intimidation, no sneers, just sincerity. Don excused himself to sample some roasted corn, leaving Ramona to help Gwen distribute literature on Know Your Rights. People came and went, some still wary, but many expressing gratitude for the changes. A slender woman approached hesitantly. "Are you Miss Brooks?" she asked. Ramona nodded. "Yes. Can I help you?" The woman's eyes shone. "I just wanted to say thank you. My nephew was harassed by Caldwell last year. We were too scared to report it, but you gave us courage to speak up." Ramona swallowed back the lump in her throat. "I'm so sorry for what happened to your nephew. I hope he's doing all right." She nodded. "He is, and I'm telling him every day, you inspired so many people." Ramona felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. But it wasn't just me." The woman reached out and squeezed Ramona's hand. "Thank you," she repeated, then walked away. That night, Ramona sat on her father's porch swing, gazing at the stars. A gentle breeze rustled the last of the fall leaves. She was exhausted but hopeful. Brookford would never be perfect, but the hold of crooked cops and complicit officials had been broken. And it all started because she decided not to stay silent. Don joined her on the swing, offering a steaming mug of tea. "You did good, kid." She sipped the tea, letting the warmth spread through her. "We did good," she corrected, smiling at him. He laughed softly. "I'll take that." A comfortable silence stretched between them. In the distance, she could hear faint traffic and the hum of the city beginning to transform. Brookford's journey toward justice became a catalyst for broader change throughout the region. The FBI's sweep revealed deeper corruption in neighboring towns, prompting more arrests and reforms. People started sharing stories once hidden in the shadows, no longer convinced that silence was their only option. Ramona continued teaching math at the local school, but now she also lectured occasionally on civic duty and the power of standing up for one's rights. She established an after-school group where teens learned about legal processes, peaceful protest, and how to document encounters with the authorities responsibly. Her personal life found a new equilibrium. She moved back to her own apartment, though she regularly visited Don's house. She and Gwen became close friends, united by a bond forged in adversity. They, along with Tasha and Dolores, formed the Citizens Alliance for Accountability, championing training sessions for officers and community engagement events. Though the ghosts of the past still lingered, no one could erase decades of mistrust overnight. Brookford began redefining itself. The new police chief held regular town halls, restoring a measure of faith in law enforcement. Volunteers signed up in droves to mentor at-risk youth, determined to uplift the next generation. Ramona learned several profound lessons from her ordeal, lessons she now shared openly whenever people asked about her story. Silence lets injustice grow. The more we tolerate or ignore wrongdoing, the deeper it festers. Speaking out, even at great risk, can spark change. Unity is stronger than fear. Alone, she felt vulnerable and terrified. But once she connected with others who had been harassed, once a lawyer and a whistleblower stepped up, they became unstoppable. Systems can change. Corrupt structures might seem immovable, but with enough pressure, from media, from federal agencies, from community voices, they can be dismantled. Hope persists. Even in the darkest corners, there's a chance for renewal. Brookford wasn't a lost cause. It just needed people brave enough to demand better. Her final message to anyone willing to listen: when you see wrongdoing, don't assume someone else will fix it. You might be that someone. If Ramona's story resonates with you, share it. Spark a conversation with friends or coworkers about accountability in your own community. Stand up for someone who might be facing intimidation. Remember, you don't have to be fearless. You only have to be brave for a moment longer than the fear can hold you back. Change often comes from unexpected corners. A quiet teacher, a determined lawyer, a whistleblower risking everything. Their courage can ignite a movement that reshapes an entire city. If you feel the call, answer it. Because real justice doesn't wait. It needs someone to stand up and say, "No more." Author's note: this story is a fictional narrative set in the United States, reflecting cultural dynamics and systemic challenges often reported in real-life incidents of police misconduct. It is intended for readers aged 25-45, though its messages of community, courage, and reform speak to a universal audience. The emotional tone, dramatic twists, and ultimate triumph against corruption aim to keep you engaged, provoke thought, and inspire meaningful dialogue about justice and social change. May it serve as a testament to how even a single voice can help reshape an entire system, and remind us that the quietest among us can sometimes roar the loudest.